Hi guys, I am the Naval Guy, and today I will be discussing part 2 of the Littorio class battleships for the Italian Navy. So for today, I will discuss Roma, Imperial, and how effective these ships were in the Second World War. Roma and Imperial were slightly modified versions of the Littorio class. They had a raked bow that seems to be pointing upwards, and there were also several changes to the superstructure design. So first, I'll be discussing battleship Roma. Roma was laid down in September 1948 and was commissioned in June 1942. In the few months of her commission, she was just left in port, being used as an anti-aircraft battery. Now, the reason why she was in port for all those months is because the Italian Navy was very low on fuel, and they also needed to conserve their fuel. So all of their major capital ships that took up most of the naval fuel were in port. Now, while she was defending the port of La Spezia, she was hit by 2 bombs, which caused severe damage to her. In June 1943, she was repaired in the port of Genoa, and by September 1943, she was back in service. She was meant to be deployed in a mission along with other Italian ships, but this had to be cancelled due to Italy's capitulation. When sailing to Malta along with the rest of the Italian fleet for internment, here she was hit by a Fritz X radio-controlled bomb. She took a serious hit and heavily flooded the bulkheads and the aft engine rooms. She started descending to port, and when another bomb hit the forward engine room, when it immediately sunk, it broke in half. After it broke in half, it capsized, taking down 1,393 men. Now we will move on to the Imperial. She was launched in November 1949, but since it was launched pretty late, the Italians left it there and focused their priorities on other ships. She was left to rot. When Italy capitulated, she was left in Trieste, where she was soon captured by the Germans, who used it for target practice. The remains of the hull were bombed by Allied bombers in February 1945. Then she was raised and refloated in 1947, and then she was scrapped in Venice in the late 1940s to the early 1950s. So, how effective were the ships in World War II? Well, not much. You see, these ships were quite involved in the war, taking part in many major Mediterranean battles. But even though if they didn't get damaged by the torpedoes that ultimately kind of sealed their fate, they really wouldn't be effective in the war. You see, by this time, naval aviation was the prime, it was sort of the top thing that all the navies in the world wanted. And by this time, battleships were quite outdated. And even if there were major naval battles from gun to gun, these ships would be quite outdated. Take a battle versus USS Missouri, for example. Now, Missouri has better aiming capabilities, way better radar, better guns, and better maneuverability. While the Roma has pretty decent radar, decent guns, and basically decent everything. And even, for example, for a ship more up-to-date at that time, take the South Dakota class, for example. Now, the USA was capable of making the small ship really pack a punch. Now, take the Italians. They made this big ship with this useless aft end that basically is just a torpedo magnet. So, it will just immediately get destroyed. That aft end is just quite ugly, and you can see here by the photos the third gun turret, it overhangs and it looks quite ugly. So basically, when fighting, the third aft turret was useless because it revealed the stern, which can take very bad damage. Now, these ships were up to date for European standards, but from international standards, these ships were quite outdated already. Because you can see by the examples I mentioned earlier, the Missouri and the South Dakota, these ships, if ever fought, would just immediately sink the Littorio class immediately. And if the Littorio class would have clashed, for example, the Bismarck class, take that. Now, it probably could have won because Bismarck was outgunned. But then again, these are European standards, and other navies of the world were building carriers and more advanced technologies. So, that is the verdict of the Littorio class battleships. So, I hope you guys have enjoyed this 2-part series. And thank you guys for watching. Comment, like, and subscribe. And I'll see you next time. Goodbye.